how do you document a life? Like, how do you document a real human experience? The first challenge is obviously like, how do you just be truthful with yourself? But then there's so many other challenges that come along with it. Like, I could say anything right now. Like, I lose myself in the absurdity of the video journal, of like trying to document anything. And I guess like that's kind of something that I've always been fascinated with. Like the idea of the way that I share is, don't structure the absurdity. Like, just actually be and see what happens. And weirdly enough, like, structure forms. Like, you can't help it. You start to tell these stories in a way that creates a cohesive narrative. And if you don't, you feel weird about it. And it's just, you would look like a crazy person if you didn't manufacture a narrative. Like, you can't not have one. You can't just document a human life as it is. You couldn't write a book and just write whatever came to your head and then publish that to the world. No one would read it. Like, but that's what we really are. Like, if we look at our lives, I guess to some extent we still create this narrative structure and meaning into how we go about our being. Like, we get a job, we study something, and we tell ourselves these stories, and we tell our families these stories. We're always telling stories. Like, so I guess the insight is like, without stories, where would we be? Because what would you be doing if it didn't have to make sense? If there didn't have to be a before and an after, and there was just this moment? Like, how different would you behave if you didn't have to make sense? And it's a terrifying concept to even begin to imagine a human being not making sense, or life not making sense, is the real fear. Like, what would that be? Like, I don't even want to, like, dip my toes into that river, like, of insanity. Like, but people do. And that's freedom. But there's got to be some kind of balance to that freedom. Like, how much absurdity and meaninglessness can you withstand? And meaninglessness, even when I say that word and I feel that word, it feels strange because it has connotations. Meaninglessness, for me, it's associated with nihilism and and the ideas that go along with nihilism, and not true nihilism, like pop culture nihilism, the popular concepts that have like infected the minds of everybody, and the convenient truths, or like what people want to accept as truth, where everything is meaningless. So what's the point? I'm just gonna eat chicken and sit on the couch. That convenient cherry picking, truth making nihilism. So when I say meaninglessness, all of that comes to the surface. But like, it's not what this is about. Like, I'm really in a place where I'm wondering, like, I don't know, it's just fascinating to me that we do this. And that if you just stop for a minute and think about it, the stories that you've made up about who you are and what society is, and what your job means or what school was all about, like, because I've seen so many stories now, because I've made it a bit of a life purpose to go around and listen to people's stories as they are and not have no suggestion, just listen, just observe, and like you find out like how much it varies from person to person, like the reality that they're living in and the kinds of experiences that they're having and the meaning that they're weaving. It just boggles the mind. And I'm quite grateful that I'm like able to construct meaning that makes sense to me and makes sense to others, because in a lot of this journey of listening to these stories, some of these stories that people construct for themselves, like, this is who I am. Those very simple stories. This is who I am. This is the journey that I've been on, and this is what my life's all about. This is what I've learned. When we tell those stories, some people, the stories aren't received at all, and they're so alone. Like, and I felt like that myself for a long time. Like, if I ever really tried to connect with another person with my true story that I felt was who I am, and what life is all about, and what reality is for me, there wouldn't be any. I wouldn't be able to really connect. But now, fortunately, I've met like dozens of people that like have been able to feel what I'm trying to express at its full depth, which is like, for a human being, like, I think that's one of the biggest goals, like the biggest, people talk about like the dopamine reward, like the chemical response in your mind when you see a like on your Instagram photo and you get that little hit of dopamine. I don't believe in the reducing the human mind to chemistry, and I don't believe in reducing diagnosis, especially to like imbalances in the brain. I hate the what brain chemistry ideas have been used to do to the world. But just for a moment, I'm going to play with the concept of like that dopamine hit that we receive when we get some gratification, because I wanted to say, like, I think you get the biggest, most profound feeling of completeness, which would be the ultimate dopamine hit, like the flood of dopamine, when you do feel received at your full depth, where you've just communicated like the most hectic, abstract, absurd version of your story about reality and who you are or what you perceive, and the other person has just, like, you can feel and in your heart that the other person knows what you mean, and like there's those moments where you just received in your wholeness. It's just like, and like I said, I've met dozens of people and I feel so fortunate. And the wild thing is, like, if you keep your stories relatively simple, relatively you know you don't stray from the path, you stick to the program, you strive to fit in, which is like all of those things for me. Like, I've always gone the opposite. Like, I didn't want to fit in, I didn't want to be like everybody else, I didn't want to follow the program, I wanted to break all of the rules, I wanted to test everything out for myself, and I just went against everything. And that's when you end up with these stories that, like, they don't make sense to everybody, because you've taken just a path through reality that, like, not many people understand. It's like You've learned a bunch of different languages that nobody speaks. Like, how are you going to tell somebody about these experiences that you've been having? They have no precedent in their own lives to begin to understand. They have no familiarity, like, or similarity. There's nothing in your experience that you can even begin to create metaphors. Like, I speak in metaphors so much. Like, I'll constantly in these journals like make up a metaphor because I know maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. Maybe like most people wouldn't really know what I was talking about if I just said it. And what even would I say anyway? Language, man. But yeah, I speak in metaphors because metaphors are the closest thing we've got to being able to really connect. And like, you can, if you know what the metaphor means, then maybe you can imagine the experience that I'm having, or the experience that I have had, or the experience that I want to have. Sometimes I'll use a metaphor for that. So yeah, like, I think the more free you are is the whole point of this. The more free you are, the more absurd it seems, and the harder it is to create a story and a cohesive narrative for reality, for your life, for your identity that you can share with others and it makes sense. And that's maddening. And I'm just really impressed with anybody who navigates life freely and embraces the absurdity and embraces the freedom of like exploring everything, even if it's not going to make sense to anybody else, and you are going to have to be alone, and you are going to have to figure so much out for yourself. And even at the end of it all, when you have figured it all out and you're feeling good about it, and you've processed these traumas and things, and you're in a good place, that nobody understands you. Like, even if it's a positive thing, it can still be maddening. Like, you're so happy you've reached this point where it all makes sense, but it doesn't make sense. It only makes sense to you. Like, but keep going if you're at that point, because you will eventually have those connections that I talked about where you can express yourself on that deepest level and it's fully received. And you'll have that experience over and over again eventually. But the most important thing is that you don't stop being yourself, because then all of those stories that have never been heard will keep living inside of you, and it will keep feeling like nothing makes sense. And you just, it's like you have this mess inside of you, but it's actually not a mess once somebody else can see it. There's a few things that are, I'm just gonna put that off to the side. But yeah, all I really wanted to say is like, I'm proud of you, even if I don't know you, for like being yourself. If you're on a journey where you are embracing this kind of freedom, and yeah, just keep going, because the only reason that you are gonna feel alone is because you gave up and you tried to be like everybody else. And that story is going to keep living inside of you, but it's never going to be told. And that's what feels so bad. Or that's what felt, this is all about me. Like zoom all the way back out. Okay, that's right. I'm just rambling about what's going on in my mind. This is my video journal. It's not intended to be advice or guidance. I'm just expressing what I'm thinking and feeling in the present moment. But like, I'm sure that it applies to somebody out there. And this might be exactly what you needed to hear just to get through that next step. And I feel like that's what a lot of the journals are good for. Like, people always say, like, this came at just the right time. Sometimes it happens to me as well. Like, I will just, the words that are coming out of my own mouth, I'm like, man, I needed to hear that. If you do get anything out of these videos and other people that might benefit, like, pass it on. Click the like button for me. That helps them spread, helps YouTube learn about what the kinds of people, the kinds of crazy people who are into this. Leave your comments down below. I love the discussions in the comments. I love that, like, some people are so thoughtful and they'll share like things that really make me contemplate more deeply and have new insights as well. And yeah, don't forget to hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. Create yourself a YouTube account if you don't have a YouTube account, because it's just easier to follow along. Because I don't really promote or market myself at all, which is probably something silly. Um, and yeah, I have a website, kailives.com, but I'm just so flat out maintaining all of the things that I'm creating that I don't like. I just have faith that like what's meant to happen, like the people that need to find me will find me, and I'm at that point now where it's really not worrying me how everything unfolds. But yeah, thanks for watching.